Welcome to the Writer at Work podcast. Ms. Catherine M.H. and Kit Boyer are your co-hosts. They will be bringing you updates on their journey to becoming full-time authors, as well as writing advice, book reviews, and information to help you on your road to authordom. Join these authors as they work on their writing careers.
Welcome to the Writer at Work podcast. I'm Ms. Catherine M.H., and with me, as always, is Kit Boyer. And today, we have an episode on process. And the process we're talking about is giving up or knowing when to move on.
Yes, I will begin, is what I have decided just now.
Go for it.
So it seems like giving up would be a bad thing, but actually giving up has a lot of benefits in terms of writing. And whenever you give up on a writing project, especially creative writing specifically, I would encourage you not to think of it as giving up, but rather setting it aside for now. Some really good reasons to set a project aside include ideas being only partially formed. So you have kind of an idea of kind of what you want to say, but you don't really have whatever it is to finish that story or really tell the tale that you want to tell. And that could be, not enough experience or not enough understanding of the topic or not enough time to delve into it. Or even if you're a younger writer, you might not have enough maturity yet to get into that. I know that was the case for me when I was younger. I have a lot of stories that I started writing when I was a kid or when I was a young adult that I set aside because I couldn't finish them. I didn't have enough life experience, and the story wasn't coming out as authentic as I wanted it to, or as meaningful as I wanted it to, and I needed to go out and live life for a while and come back to it and then see if I could, improve it. And many of those stories I did actually improve by leaving them aside for a little bit. Do you set projects aside ever?
I do. So I set projects aside when I have finally finished a draft. So especially the first draft. If I've finished the first draft, I will set it to the side, because if I start immediately going back to go edit, I will feel like I have never finished the book. So for me, I set it aside. I'd like to set it aside no longer than a month. The longest I did was a year. And then I came back with those fresh eyes that I could do an editing pass with.
Yeah, that's really great advice. My one of my creative writing teachers had the same advice. She said, when you finish a project, when you've done your first draft, put it in a drawer, lock that drawer, and leave it. Leave it for a month or a year, and then come back to it and see. And just like you're saying, look at it with fresh eyes, look at it with more experience, different ideas, a fresh brain. You've done other things in between and you're not caught up on that project like you were.
Yeah, it definitely helps to do that. The other thing I do is sometimes you do give up on a story. And I know it sounds bad, and as a writer, you cringe to it. You're like, no, every story I write is perfect and needs to be told. It's really not true. Sometimes the story really won't get written. Maybe you're feeling a lot of writer's block with it. And you really do need to take that step back and be like, is this the story that I want to spend all this time on writing? And for me, some of them are a no. I do have stories where I have started, they're cool. Occasionally I'll go back and throw a new paragraph into it, like, oh, that was cool. But they're there, and they were things that I practiced and I learned something from. So when you give up on something, it's not really giving up. It's you've learned the lesson that you needed to from that story. So it doesn't feel like I'm a failure because I didn't finish writing it. No, I I started that story and I realized that point of view will never work for me. So I have one where I am third person close. And that point of view is extremely difficult for me to write in. I do not like it. I like third person omniscient. So for me, writing and testing out different things and then being like, no, is good. Like, that's what I like about writing, is that I can give up, but I've learned my lesson from that piece.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have improved your prose, you have improved your writing practice, you can work on specific craft things, you know? Some people really like to practice writing short stories, and they don't do anything with the short stories, they just use it as a form to hone craft. And that's another thing you can definitely do. You don't need to share every story you write, you don't need to finish every story you write, because just doing it, any amount of it, is practice, and that's excellent.
Yes. I have one book. My dear friend Kristen would murder me if I was to bring this book back out into the light. We worked on it for about 1.5 years. Me, mostly. So I would hand off every version to her as I wrote it. And it was horrible. Like, I still have a copy of it. It is the worst. The thing is filled with passive voice. I tried every point of view under the sun. So, like, middle of the chapter, I'd change the point of view. Like, and I mean, like, I'd go from, like, third person to first person.
Wowee.
So I tried everything. I threw every trope that I could think of into this book. I had every pretty much genre that you could have in this book. I threw all of it into the basket, and I wrote it for 1.5 years. There's about 200 pages of it. And from that, we put it aside. Thank God. And I learned what genre I like to write in. I learned what point of view I really enjoy. I know what kind of tropes I don't like to write, what ones I like to lean into. And so it never really felt like giving up. We've joked about going back to the story now that both of us are better writers and co-writing this idea together, because we had something planned for like 3 books. But it's okay. It's okay to decide to put something away, to no longer take that energy and put it into that project. And that's really, maybe you just needed to hear that, and it's okay to do it. Because sometimes that's all you really need. And then follow that new shiny idea.
Yes.
Who knows? Maybe you just put it away for a little bit and you'll come back to it. But don't worry if you don't come back to it. Unless you're doing that consistently, then start to worry. No. If you're never finishing anything, maybe go back to some of the old ones.
Yeah. Well, a trick for people who can't finish anything is to choose a smaller project. So instead of saying, I'm going to write a, 17 million word space opera series, say, I'm going to finish this scene with this character, or I'm going to treat this chapter as a short story and I'm just going to write it. Or, have smaller goals, set yourself smaller goals. That usually helps people who have trouble finishing things, because you kind of snowball, If you set a smaller goal and you reach it, and then you set another small goal and you reach it, it builds up, it makes you feel good. And also you're actually finishing things and you have something to show for your work, which is super valuable.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think I've said a few times before on this podcast is that the goal is that you don't stop writing. So you might need to put something aside because it doesn't spark any interest or joy or desire to write in you. And that's okay. You are going to have so many ideas and so many projects that this one project, it's important and it's cool and great job thinking of it, and all the work that you've done on it, excellent. And it's okay to put it down for now or forever and move past it and work on something else that really sparks your interest. Because you want to keep writing. If you get stuck on something and you don't practice anymore, you don't write anymore because you can't figure out what to do with it, or it's just not very good, or it isn't meeting your expectations, then you're going to get stuck in a place where you just don't even write at all, and that sucks. So instead, just put it down.
Yes.
Another thing, some examples I have actually are my chapbook that I did. It's a collection of poems. Poems are really short projects. So if anybody's looking for something to motivate them, or they don't have a lot of time to write, poetry is pretty good. It doesn't matter how good you are at poetry. It just matters that you can say, I finished a poem. It only takes, 5 to 15 minutes to write a pretty okay poem.
About death.
Yeah, you could write about death. You could write about whatever you want, whatever angsty, ridiculous, awesome, whatever topic you want. But with my chapbook, I wrote the poems over the course of a few years. And then I finally decided to collect them all into a chapbook. And I kept writing as I was putting the chapbook together, and I added more poems to it. And I had people read it and give me feedback, and I added more poems. And I went back and when I first wrote my poems, I was like, these are perfect. I don't need to edit these ever again. I'm like, I know every time I read it, I know how I felt when I wrote it. I still have that feeling, that closeness to having written it recently. So I didn't want to edit it because I knew it conveyed what I wanted it to. But for some of them, it didn't convey that to my readers. It didn't convey those emotions or those feelings to my readers. So what I ended up doing was coming back to it. About a year after I completed my chapbook altogether, I put it aside. I didn't look at it again. And then I came back to it and I reread it, and I was like, oh, like I'm distant enough from all of these pieces in time, that I can see that they convey to me, I still feel that nostalgia for that time in my life or for that piece that I wrote. But I can see more clearly now that it doesn't exactly convey it in the way I wanted to, so here's how I'm going to change it and edit it and fix it so that it is what I want it to be and it says what I want it to say. So that's something that when you set something aside, you can come back to it with that kind of mindset. I also would suggest, probably to everybody, to have a book of some sort. It can be on your computer, it can be a little brown notebook, that's what I have. And just when you think of a cool idea or like a line for a poem or a really nice smooth piece of prose, write it down. Or if you're reading something else that somebody has written or listening to a podcast and you're like, oh my God, like that's so cool that they were able to combine those elements to make blah, 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 blah. Just write that quickly down in your little brown notebook or on your notes app or whatever you have. And then eventually you'll come back and you'll look at it and you'll be like, oh, yeah, okay. And you'll want to write that. It'll be really motivating for you. And I think we have another podcast episode that we're going to release about how to improve, and this kind of overlaps that a little bit. But if you want to improve, taking time, improving over time is a really easy thing to do. You just keep reading, keep writing, and just don't get demotivated. That's the only thing. If you need to take a break, but don't let yourself get demotivated. And if that means chasing every new and shiny thing for 10 years or 20 years and not finishing any projects, that's okay. It's okay. That doesn't make you less talented. It doesn't make you less of a writer. It just means that you are taking a longer time to educate yourself and improve and practice. And that is something really cool. I didn't know that was going to happen for me. I'm going to save the rest of this for the other episode because I don't want to ruin our other episode. But basically what I'm saying is set something aside, come back to it, use your little book of snippets for ideas, and don't let yourself get stressed out. That's the key for pretty much all writing advice is if you're stressed out and you don't work well under stress, just like don't be stressed out. Whatever the thing is that's making you feel stressed out, just like ease up on it. There's a concept called Wu Wei. I'm not a Taoist, but I think Taoism's really cool. And I think the idea of Wu Wei that resonates with me, I don't know if this is like straight up what it is, but what seems correct is going with the flow, basically. So like if you're in, on one side of a river and you need to get to the other side, you don't swim against the stream, right? You don't swim against the current. You don't try to go diagonally upstream to get to where you need to go. You go kind of straight across and follow the flow of the water, and you won't get so tired going across. And you'll still get to the other side, not quite at the point maybe where you thought you would end up, but you still get there. And it's easier, and it flows, and it's nice, and it's, you're not tumbling against the rocks or whatever, and you're not trying to, tuck yourself out, swimming against the way that things are going. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If the flow of things, the ease and the comfort and the good placement of your energy is somewhere else, do that. Don't worry about it. You're going to come back to it. You're going to improve. Any time spent away from writing doesn't mean that you aren't improving, especially if you also take time to read and watch shows and listen to podcasts and read webtoon and, do other things that expose you to writing and ideas and creativity and storytelling. Yeah.
So yeah, it's okay to put stuff to the side, and it's okay to decide that you're no longer going to come back to something. So don't be afraid of that.
Yeah. You might be surprised. It might show up in your work later on. Whatever story idea or character or situation you had might fit really well with a future story idea that you didn't even have any idea or indication might happen, You never know what's going to happen in the future. So
Yep.
Be excited. Do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well then, thank you for listening, everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hear what we have to say about writing. Please feel motivated and not stressed out, and give yourself a break. You can like, subscribe, social media, all that stuff. We've got links below. Have a great week, and see you next time.
Bye.